Today on Rappler, Indonesian presidential candidate Prabowo withdraws from the elections, saying there's been massive and systematic fraud, as tally shows his rival Joko Widodo won. And the train carrying the bodies of crash victims leave Ukrainian rebel-controlled areas. Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. A tally of final results shows Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo or Jokowi and running mate Yusuf Kalla win Indonesia's third democratic presidential election. The count shows Jokowi with a lead of almost 8.5 million votes. The final results are scheduled to be announced by the General Elections Commission or the KPU around 8 p.m. Tuesday or 9 p.m. Manila time around now, but the official count does show the pair winning in 23 provinces. Jokowi and Kalla get more than 71 million votes or 53.15% of the total voting population. The two win two-thirds of the vote in three known strongholds, Central Java, South Sulawesi, and Bali. Rivals, former General Prabowo Subianto and former Economics Minister Hatta Rajasa, won in 10 other provinces and had a total of about 62.5 million votes. Prabowo and Hatta dominated the most populous province in Indonesia, West Java, with 59.78% of almost 23.7 million votes cast. Just a few hours ago, Prabowo withdraws from the presidential elections, saying he rejects the process because of massive and systematic fraud. His withdrawal comes less than 2 hours before the General Elections Commission or the KPU was scheduled to officially announce the results. Prabowo says the electoral process is problematic, undemocratic, and violated the Constitution. He also accuses KPU of ignoring the recommendations of the Election Supervisory Board on alleged irregularities. He says, quote, "We will use our constitutional right to reject a flawed presidential election, and we are pulling out of the ongoing process." Prabowo calls on all his supporters to remain calm, saying they would fight through legal means and not through violence. It was not immediately clear if the Prabowo camp will file a legal challenge with the Constitutional Court. Legal expert Irman Putrasiden says Prabowo's refusal to sign the election's results will threaten its constitutionality. Prabowo's rival Joko Widodo or Jokowi and running mate Yusuf Kalla are expected to be declared winners of Indonesia's most divisive presidential elections ever. In response to Prabowo's protest, Jokowi says, "I'm sure Pak Prabowo is a statesman who would prioritize the interests of the nation and the state above all else." We have Rappler Indonesia's Bureau Chief Jet Damaso Santos on the line to give us an update on official election results. Jet, what's going on?
Hi, Maria. Yes, everyone is still now waiting for Indonesia's Election Commission to formally announce its results. But everybody is already congratulating Jokowi for winning the election. In fact, they've already held a press conference thanking the people of Indonesia and the Election Commission for this victory. Footage on TV shows his supporters already celebrating. At the same time, on the Prabowo camp, there's been confusion in what he actually means by withdrawal.
This is actually very different from conceding, right? How does this impact on, one of the analysts earlier said that this threatens the constitutionality of the results. And what is being said about this? And again, the first time it's ever happened that a candidate has withdrawn.
You know what, Maria, of all the scenarios expected today, this was not one of them. Nobody expected Prabowo to, everybody expected Prabowo to go to the Constitutional Court and challenge the results. But for him to say he's rejecting the results and withdrawing from the process, that hasn't happened before. And it led to several hours of confusion. The stock market dropped by more than 2 points before rebounding before markets closed for the day. The problem is that if he withdraws from the election, then it could mean that the electoral process effectively only had one candidate, which cannot happen. So there's still a lot of confusion on this, but over the past hour, we've been hearing statements from Prabowo's inner circle, saying that he did not actually withdraw as a candidate, but only from the counting process. There will be a press conference on this from his camp tomorrow morning, but for now, analysts are taking this to mean that he's still keeping his option to file a challenge at the Constitutional Court open.
Interesting. More than 130 million Indonesians voted on July 9th. What is the mood in Jakarta now? How would you describe it?
Well, everybody's still indoors. There were a lot of warnings circulating before today to just stay indoors, and there were worries about possible violence. So the streets were extremely, extremely quiet. But now, there hasn't been a lot of street celebrations. The streets are so full of soldiers and police, anti-riot policemen. There have been a few pro-Prabowo protesters, but everything has been relatively muted so far. I'm guessing we'll see a lot more of the celebrations later tonight when the KPU officially announces its results, or even tomorrow or the next few days.
So let's talk about the man who's slated to win, Jokowi. What does a Jokowi win mean for Indonesia?
This is really an incredible moment for democracy, not just in Indonesia, Maria, but for Southeast Asia. Indonesians have made their decision, and they voted really for change. Jokowi is the first Indonesian president who is not part of the political elite. He's an orang kecil in Bahasa, a small person. He doesn't come from a political family. He was a furniture salesman from a small town. In fact, I believe it's the first, ordinary person who is democratically elected to lead a Southeast Asian nation. We talked to Anies Baswedan, one of his, a key member of his campaign team, a few weeks ago during the campaign, and he said, I really like that quote, that a Jokowi win means that now any Indonesian can become president.
Very exciting and quite uncertain. We're going to go back to you, Jet Damaso in Jakarta, as we hear more from Indonesia, and please keep us updated when it is officially announced. Thank you, Jet.
Thank you.
Let's turn to more tragic news. The morgue train carrying the remains of 280 people from the MH17, the Malaysia Airlines 17 disaster, arrives in the Kiev-controlled city of Kharkiv and is out of Ukrainian rebel control. The bodies will be put on a plane to go to the Netherlands. 193 Dutch citizens were killed in the crash. The plane's black boxes, which record cockpit activity and flight data, were handed over to the Prime Minister of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, Alexander Borodai. U.S. President Barack Obama blames Russia, which he says has, quote, direct influence over these separatists. Moscow hits back, saying records showed a Ukrainian military plane was flying a few kilometers from the Boeing 777 before it crashed on Thursday. Ukraine dismisses the claim, calling it an irresponsible and false statement by Russia. This is Malaysia Airlines' second disaster in just 4 months after flight MH17 was lost, reportedly in the Indian Ocean. That missing jet has yet to be found. Malaysia Airlines confirms it diverted a plane from its former route over Ukraine in the wake of MH17 crash to another conflict area airspace, this time over Syria. Defending itself, the airline said MH4's new flight path was in accordance with routes approved by the United Nations Aviation Agency, International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. It says, quote, the Syrian airspace was not subject to restrictions. Dozens of airlines previously flying over crisis-stricken eastern Ukraine abandoned the route between Asia and Europe after the MH17 crash. Air traffic tracker Flight Radar 24 on Monday tweeted the July 20 flight flew over war-torn Syria, where the conflict is raging both on the ground and in the air. It says, as far as we've seen, MH4 was the only transcontinental flight going over Syria. Right after the MH17 crash, Malaysian Airlines was also questioned about flying over conflict-torn Ukraine. The airline denied it was negligent then and said that international air authorities had deemed the flight path over Ukraine secure. South Korean police on Tuesday say they found the corpse of fugitive ferry owner Yoo Byung-yoon. Yoo's been the target of a months-long manhunt over April's Sewol ferry disaster that killed nearly 300 people. The heavily decomposed corpse of the 73-year-old Yoo was discovered on June 12 in Suncheon, a city 300 kilometers or 186 miles south of capital Seoul. Police say the body was too decomposed to determine the cause of death, although several empty bottles of alcohol were found at the scene. A more detailed forensic analysis will be done to determine the cause and date of Yoo's death. Yoo was the patriarch of the family that owned and operated the Sewol ferry that sank on April 16th with 476 people on board, including 325 high school children. 294 died, with 10 victims still unaccounted for. A summons was issued for Yoo shortly after the sinking, but he refused to surrender to police and eventually escaped. The Philippines warns around 36,400 Filipinos in Israel to prepare for possible evacuation due to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The Foreign Affairs Department, or DFA, issues a warning Tuesday as it raises Crisis Alert Level 2, known as the restriction phase, over Israel and the West Bank. Alert Level 2 is issued when there are, quote, real threats to the life, security, and property of Filipinos arising from internal disturbance, instability, and external threats. DFA says its earlier order for Filipinos to evacuate the Gaza Strip still stands under Alert Level 4. Up to 109 Filipinos live in the Gaza Strip. Escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas has killed more than 570 people so far. Leaders from all over the world continue to urge Israel to take greater steps to prevent civilian casualties, with UN Chief Ban Ki-moon appealing for the violence to stop. Many of the dead are civilians, a third of them children. But Hamas has so far rejected calls for a truce. It says it will enter into a ceasefire if Israel stops the siege and releases its prisoners. The final version of the draft law that will serve as the legal basis of a new autonomous government in the southern Philippines remains in limbo. Government Peace Panel Chair Miriam Coronel Ferrer says there continues to be, in her words, significant points of difference between the parties after 4 days of discussions. President Benigno Aquino and Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, Chair Alhaj Murad Ibrahim are set to meet again. No date and time has been set at this point. Aquino's Communications Secretary Sonny Coloma says the planned meeting will aim to thresh out differences on the Bangsamoro Basic Law. Aquino earlier said he wants the Bangsamoro Basic Law submitted to Congress in time for the opening of its second regular session. Vice President Jejomar Binay faces plunder accusations for an allegedly overpriced multi-million peso parking building in Makati City. The complaint filed before the ombudsman says the contract for the Makati parking building was supposed to have amounted to only 245.56 million pesos, but was overpriced by more than 1.314 billion pesos. The final contract price was pegged at 1.56 billion pesos. The complainants say Binay and his son, incumbent Mayor Junjun Binay, quote, violated every rule in construction manuals and government procedures in pushing for a project that was grossly overpriced and funded by various loans irregularly passed through the City Council through supplemental budgets for 5 years. Let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 5, climate scientists from the U.S. say last month was the hottest June since record-keeping began in 1880. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, says June registered a combined average temperature over land and ocean surfaces at 61.2 Fahrenheit or 16.22 degrees Celsius, 0.72 degrees Celsius or 1.30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 20th century average for the month. The month of June has been warmer than the 20th century average for 38 years in a row, NOAA said. At number 9, online security experts warned the public of scammers using the MH17 crash in East Ukraine to link to either pornographic websites or spam pages. A security firm detects spam links on tweets pretending to be about MH17 but are linked to spam. On Facebook, a community page dedicated to one of the victims uses his name and photo, but it links to a pornographic website. Richard Cox of anti-spam body Spam House tells the BBC it is a fairly rapid and predictable response by the individuals behind it. They're all to make money, there is no compassion involved. And at number 10, Manila will be in for a bag of tricks when magician David Blaine performs at the Araneta Coliseum on September 12. The New York-born magician will stage a 90-minute show called Real or Magic. It will be his first ever performance in the Philippines. He started his magic tricks in 1997 and took them to a higher level by performing death-defying tricks inspired by legendary magician Harry Houdini. These include being frozen in ice for 63 hours. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Britain's Prince George turns 1 Tuesday. The BBC reports the young prince's parents, Prince William and Duchess Kate, are expected to throw a simple birthday party for George at their Kensington Palace apartment Tuesday. Here are 2 new pictures of the third in line to the British throne released for his birthday. In a statement, the proud parents thank people for their warm and generous good wishes. The couple says, "We would like to take this opportunity on George's first birthday to thank everyone over the last year, wherever we've met them, both at home and overseas, for their warm and generous good wishes to George and our family." Every story on Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers and our viewers the most emotionally. If you take a look, these 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes on their mood meter. Interestingly enough, we have the plunder case filed against Vice President BINAY and MAKATI officials, 5% amused, 91% happy. We have the Iglesia ni Cristo fast facts, Iglesia ni Cristo's Philippine Stadium, the arena that they just opened yesterday, 58% happy, 24% annoyed. That green bringing out the story that's gotten the most number of votes is actually a thought leader's piece, a letter that was written by Sylvia Claudio to Juan Ponce Enrile. It is a piece that is full of her own experience over a lifetime, very strong, 25% inspired, 56% happy. That green bringing out the mood of the day. Today, most people are happy. Well, that is Rappler's newscast for today, Tuesday, July 22, 2014. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. Stay tuned for the final official account, the results at the Indonesian elections. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.